which had a real sort of transformative effect on both the learners in prison, but also on the researchers themselves. I remember going on during the pilot period, I went on a visit just to see what it was like, and coming out, sitting in the car afterwards and going, there but for the grace of God go any of us.
Hello there, I'm Sarah McCluskey, and this is Research Adjacent. Each episode, I talk to amazing research-adjacent professionals about what they do and why it makes a difference. Keep listening to find out why we think the research-adjacent space is where the real magic happens. Today's guest is Kirsty Ross. Kirsty is a public engagement and culture change professional who currently has not one but 3 jobs spread across various projects at the universities of St Andrews and Strathclyde in Scotland. Kirsty began her career working in vaccine development, but discovered that talking about and sharing her research was more fun than actually doing it, so she moved into public engagement. In this podcast, we talk about a lot of the projects that she'd worked on, including cell block science, which is bringing science into prisons, quilts for cancer, using research-inspired designs to create quilts for patients going through chemotherapy, and the very fun, go and check it out, Fortissat Science Alliance Podcast, which has children interviewing researchers. She also talks about the potential of Wikipedia for amping up research impact and why she is proudly research adjacent. Certainly, Kirsty is the first person that I saw on social media using the term research adjacent. And on top of that, we also discuss the day-to-day reality of working in public engagement. For Kirsty, this means juggling those 3 jobs and all the email that comes with it, whilst also having ADHD. But if she was queen of the world, she would tackle job precarity and short-term thinking in the public engagement world. Listen on to find out more. Welcome along, Kirsty. Thanks for joining us. I wonder if, first of all, you could just tell us a little bit about, or a lot about, what you do and your journey into that work.
Oh God, where to start? Hi everyone. My name is Dr. Kirsty Ross. I am what's known as a public engagement professional. That's the new fancy term for us. And I actually have 3 jobs at the moment. The joys of fixed-term contracts and part-time working. I've just started a new job moving within the University of St Andrews. So I'm now Explorathon project manager, 0.5 FTE. I am the outreach officer for the EPSRC MRC Centre for Doctoral Training in Optical Medical Imaging, also known as Optima, which is shared between the University of Strathclyde and the University of Edinburgh. And I am also on an Erasmus Plus project called DISI, which is all about diversity in science and science inclusion, and that's 0.2 FTE. So depends on the day of the week as to when I answer your emails, essentially. How I got here, that's a long, convoluted story. Basically, you can probably tell from the accent. I'm based in Scotland at the moment, and probably tell from the accent that I'm not originally from Scotland. I'm from the south coast of England, pretty much as far as you can go down south before you drop off the other end. And I'm pretty much first in my family to do absolutely everything I have ever done from pretty much A-levels onwards. So I did my undergrad at Edinburgh in biology. Went to the dark side, went to Glasgow to do my PhD. In vaccine development. Then I did a postdoc at Glasgow, couple of postdocs at Strathclyde, and realised I was having far more fun sharing research and talking about research than actually doing it myself. So I'd made the jump in 2015 into full-time engagement.
I mean, maybe it's a strange question to say, what does a typical day look like when you're doing so many different things, but what sorts of things does your jobs entail on a day-to-day basis?
On a day-to-day basis, it's an awful lot of emailing and using various university systems like Teams. I'm doing my damnedest to stay away from Slack. Sorry, it just feels like one platform too far. Lots and lots of emailing, lots of Teams meetings. I work, depending on day of the week, I will either be on site at my university or I'll be working from home. That's one of the benefits in terms of flexibility, in terms of where I work. I'll be having one-to-one meetings with researchers, maybe talking about grants, applications. I might be doing logistics. I have to admit, I really do kind of like the logistics part of engagement, actually, just getting all my bits and bobs together. What else will I be doing? I might be doing a bit of teaching. Might be planning the next training session, looking at applications for funding for myself to keep myself going, because all of my jobs are project-based funding. None of my roles are core funded, unfortunately. And I'm sure we'll talk about that aspect of the job later. What else? God, it's a right smorgasbord. I think that's the one term, is it's a bit of a smorgasbord. It's different every day.
Yeah.
I usually have to try and make sure that I've got the right laptop open at the time.
So doing lots of different bits and pieces of all sorts of things. Yeah. And what are the sort of challenges of that, whether it's of the work that you do or juggling all of these different roles?
The main challenge is the context switching, switching between the roles, because I recently compressed my hours to be Tuesday to Fridays. So each day is majority for one organization, but then I have an hour assigned to each day to sort of triage the emails, so it makes sure that when I come to the next day, I'm not facing a mountain of emails to have to deal with before I can get on with my actual work. The one that I really struggled with when I started actually was something called it was KPIs, key performance indicators. When you're working in academia, it's fairly obvious what success looks like. It's grants, it's papers, it's conference presentations, it's funding. It's that sort of. It's obvious, and it's fairly, the career path, the career ladder essentially is there. When I started this job, it was like my ladder was just going into clouds. I had no idea what I was, whether I was doing well, whether I was doing poorly, what I was trying, what my objectives were and what my expectations were. And sometimes your line manager doesn't always know that either, especially if it's a new role for them to line manage. So what I ended up doing was totally throwing myself in and booking myself to do lots and lots and lots and lots of stuff on the idea that doing more equals doing well, and possibly almost leading to burnout. So don't do what I do. Yeah, I've slightly tried to rein that in. I'm still occasionally sign up to too many things, but that's a recent realization that I almost certainly have ADHD, which is a real asset because I can see connections between lots and lots and lots of different things. But that comes with the side order of complete time blindness and underestimating how long it takes to do something, and issues with executive functions. That's fun. So yeah.
Are you obviously doing something right anyway with all the things that you've got going on?
My contract keeps getting extended, so I must be doing something right.
Speaking of doing things right, is there any particular projects or things you've done that you're really proud of?
Oh, I've worked on some really good projects. There was one project on my first day as an engagement professional at Strathclyde. I was basically told if I could bring in enough money to pay my salary, I could keep my job, which was fine. I like a little bit of honesty. So I did that. I brought in some funding for my salary from the Wellcome Trust for a project called Cell Block Science and Beyond the Walls. And I was looking after two prisons, HMP Shotts and HMP Lomos. And basically, the purpose of the project wasn't about recidivism or reducing reoffending rates. It was nothing to do with that. It was purely about access to education. Mm-hmm. So what I would do would be to take researchers into prison to do the same sort of stuff that they do going out to their kids' primary schools, for example, but for adult learners in prison, which had a real sort of transformative effect on both the learners in prison, but also on the researchers themselves. I remember going on during the pilot period, I went on a visit just to see what it was like, and coming out, sitting in the car afterwards and going, there, but for the grace of God, go any of us. Other peps who've gone in, one came out feeling quite anxious because you couldn't tell what they were in for, and another one came out quite thinking they just want to learn, they're just desperate to learn. So people have very different reactions, and the researchers who choose to get involved are quite unusual, being open to quite an unusual audience and working with an unusual audience. So that's one that I'm really proud of. We got an award for that one. That was quite cool.
Oh, well done.
The other one was one that it's a fairly recent one that I set up last year. Co-founded a network with some colleagues at the University of St Andrews called, bear with me, it's a long title, the Inclusion, Diversity, Equity and Accessibility and Open Knowledge Network, or IDEA Network for short. unfortunately, I couldn't use JEDI, which is Justice, Equity, Diversity and Inclusion. I did get in contact with Lucasfilm to ask, and they said no. Just from a legal point of view, I just had to double check. And basically our goal, got a couple of aims, very much sort of connected to the overall Wikipedia mission, which is to increase capacity, train people in how that you can edit Wikipedia. You might say, oh, don't cite Wikipedia, it's rubbish. Don't cite Wikipedia, cite the citations at the bottom, because that's where all the good stuff is.
Yeah.
Building capacity, so training people, getting people introduced, working on underrepresented pages or languages, filling some of those knowledge gaps, of which we know that there are many. So doing our bit to try and fill those gaps. Yeah, I'm quite proud of that one. We had 20 undergraduate students last year on a project run by the Careers Service at St Andrews called STEP. And they were working on quite different topics. One was working on historians, another on mathematicians, and then the third one was connected to a public engagement project called Antibiotics Under Our Feet. And they were all working on articles connected to their topics. So we had 20 students spending a day a week in small teams over the summer working on this. They created 26 new articles, edited a further 101.
Wow.
And as of today, those pages have had over 500,000 views.
Brilliant.
I would struggle to find any research whose papers had 500,000 views.
Yeah, absolutely.
So students come away with skills. I mean, the Antibiotics Under Our Feet project in particular was quite an interesting one, slightly arse backwards, if I could say that, because the project itself is working with schools, getting them to submit soil samples from their playgrounds, sequencing the DNA to find new pathways for antibiotic production.
Yeah.
So rather than culturing the bacteria, just going straight for the DNA, basically. But we also would then get information about what species and what genera were found in the soil. So obviously the first thing, if you give that back to the school, the first thing the school's going to do is they're going to Google it. They're going to look up, we found this in the soil. What is that? And I realized that it's entirely likely that those articles didn't exist. So I had a wee look on English Wikipedia and Simple English Wikipedia, which is aimed at young people and folks for whom English is their sort of second language, and found that I was right. Yeah, a whole bunch of those pages did not exist. And that's what the students were working on, was to make sure that those contact gaps were filled. So when the teachers went looking, there was information there for them to find.
Nice.
So
yes, that sounds brilliant. So in the kind of sector that you work in, if you had a magic wand and an unlimited budget, what would you do?
Oh, I love this question. Love this question. What would I change? I would make every engagement professional, every impact professional in universities up and down the country core funded permanent members of staff, because an awful lot of the precarity is one that I'm still struggling with. My colleagues are struggling with. Wellcome Trust ISSF, so institutional strategic support funds, they're starting to run out, and all I'm hearing is redundancies amongst my colleagues. And it's like every time a PEP walks out of a university because their contract ends, you lose decades in some cases of relationships and trust that has been built up with that individual, knowledge of the institution, and it just walks out the door. And no one seems to get no university management seem to understand just how valuable we are to the institution in terms of maintaining that continuity and not burning our audiences with a bad experience. We do a huge amount to mitigate reputational damage caused by naive, well-intentioned researchers potentially doing engagement without that support. I'd make us permanent and full-time if we want full-time, obviously. Because we keep getting these calls, you keep seeing these funding calls for, we need innovative engagement. It's like, no, you don't. What you need is tried and tested methods that have been shown and proven to work, and then you keep them going long term, not just for a year, 2 years, 3 years. You run them for 5, 10, 20, and it's just a platform opportunity for researchers to sort of dip their toes in, have a go, and then if they move on, it doesn't matter so much because the core people are there. I mean, Cell Block Science, for example, that could keep running if we had staff for it, because the costs associated with delivering those projects are, generally speaking, relatively low. You're paying for a little bit of fuel, and you might be paying, a little bit in terms of consumables, but by and large, it's time.
Yeah.
And if the time was funded, we could move mountains. We really could.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. I think so many of the things I've worked on that have had the biggest impact have been cost-wise, trivial.
Yeah,
but it's all about the people.
Yeah, I'm working on a project which is, it's another sort of Wellcome Trust, but it's Wellcome Trust Children in Need collaboration called Curiosity. And I'm working with a group called Getting Better Together Shots. So this is where my sort of ADHD golden thread of connections comes in, because the community group run the visitor centre in Shots. So that's how I got to know them. And then they got some funding to run a science club, and they asked me to help out with that. And then they subsequently applied for more money. So now what I do is I have a couple of hours a week where I look for researchers in lots of different topics. I don't really mind, what university they go to, fairly, university agnostic. And I stretch the definition of STEM as far as I can. So geographers are welcome and psychologists are welcome. And what they do is the kids record them on a podcast. So the kids actually do the interview with the researchers. And then if they're up for it, we get them to come in and do, a hands-on workshop if they feel like it, or they could just do the podcast. And because this was a reaction also to COVID, and that the kids were stuck at home, they couldn't come to Science Club. So it was a way for them sort of to come together online and do something connected to STEM online. So I send out resources in advance. So they have a little sort of 5-minute warm-up activity to get them relaxed, and have that, make sure that was connected to the researchers' research. I think we're up to about 20 or 30 episodes at this point.
Brilliant. Yeah.
And it's the kids doing the recording, and they're so funny. They are so funny.
Are. Do you want to give a plug to that? What's it called? Could people find it?
It's called if you look up on Listen Lanarkshire.
And
it's the science podcast. If you just Google science podcast, Fortissat Science Alliance is the sort of the full-blown title.
Oh, we'll see if we can get a link, and we'll put that in the show notes.
I'll give you a link for that.
Yeah, that sounds great. Oh, fab. One of the things I noticed when I was doing the background research before starting this podcast was that you were one of the first people to use hashtag research adjacent on Twitter. Why choose that phrase? Why is it something that you connect to?
It just really was a really good description of what I was. I was in there, I was part of the research process, I was associated with the research process, just not in the lab. I was research adjacent. One of my jobs involves setting up placements for our CDT students. So they get to spend 3 months on placement in any sector out with academia, which is fantastic. And these are sort of transformative placements for them. And it's part of their top component of their PhD. It's a third of their marks for that, but it's connected to them getting their PhD. So it is very much research adjacent. And actually, I keep feeling the pull. You can take the researcher out the lab, but you can't take away that way of thinking. So I keep getting the sort of, what if we could study the impact of placements on student development? And it's just like, Kirsty, you left research for a reason, but I keep getting sucked back in.
I know what you mean.
I've got ethics approvals and everything, which is just like, oh, goodness sake, Kirsty. But I genuinely think it just gives researchers and students and a more well-rounded experience. We had a project. I'm going to give another plug out for this project because I love this one. We had a project called Quilts for Cancer, which was, I was quite proud of that one because it was quite a neat, quite a focused, it wasn't necessarily huge numbers, but it's quite precise. And the idea was basically inspired by the fact that during treatment, for cancer, people generally get quite cold. I'm a quilter, and I'd met a wonderful researcher at Strathclyde called Dr. Claire Hoskins, who works on pancreatic cancer, and she just started at uni. We were having a blather, and I was like, what if we could do, quilts as an engagement method? So we applied to the Royal Society of Chemistry. Thanks to them, they're awesome for funding engagement. Thank you. And they gave us some money. And basically the idea of the project was researchers would provide us with images inspired by their research, just line drawings, fairly simple things. I thought I was going to be able to turn those into quilt patterns, and I realized very quickly that my skills did not stretch quite that far. So I put those together with a little sort of summary of the research, a little bit of information about signs and symptoms that you might be looking out for in pancreatic cancer. And then we sent it out into the world on social media. And I had no idea if this was going to work. Absolutely none at all. So we sent them out into the world. This was just when COVID hit. So we were planning on doing lots of sort of face-to-face, going along to quilting sessions, sewing sessions, going to WI, and we just couldn't do any of that. We couldn't do any of the stuff. So we put it on social media, lots of tweeting. Twitter was the best thing actually for getting the message out. And then we waited. And we waited. And we got back 16 quilts.
Wow.
We got one of the PhD students in Claire's group happens to be a guide leader. All her guides made blocks.
Oh, wow.
So sent those in. So I put those together and assembled them into, I think we ended up with 4 quilts from them. I made one. We had lots and just random people sending in quilts. So we got to have an exhibition at the SEC at a crafting show, which was really, really good. And then we also did a sort of a thank you, bring everyone who sort of contributed to the project together, sort of nibbles and drinks and stuff, and had another exhibition there, which was lovely. It was a chance to try out, different evaluation methodologies as well, which is quite good. And I think that's actually, we've written it up and it's going to be published in a book fairly soon. I'm quite looking forward to seeing that out. But the best thing was, and it's one of those sort of golden moments that you remember from engagement events, someone messaged us through our Facebook page, and she happened to be based in Canada, and said that her father was going to go in treatment. Could he possibly help him to, pick a quilt? So I sent her the photo album of all the sort of completed quilts so we could pick, the one that you like the most. He ended up picking mine.
Oh, that's so funny.
So I got to package it up, put in a box of, shortbread biscuits and send it over to Canada. And the next thing I know, she sent me a video of him unwrapping it and getting comfortably under it. It's just like, that's why we do this job.
Yeah.
Yeah, lovely. That is why, those moments keep me going when everything else just gets a little bit much.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Oh, well, and are there photos of that? We've got
the Facebook page is still up in the.
Again, we'll have to get a link for that and put that so people can go and look.
And if people, I would love it if Claire just occasionally randomly gets a quilt every time.
Yeah.
Every couple of years.
Yes, send more quilts.
Send more quilts. Always open to more quilts.
Fantastic. And I think just a last question, just keeping an eye on time, is who else, just to give a shout out to somebody else who you think is doing great work in this area? God.
I'm going to struggle and apologise in advance to everyone who I'm going to forget. But I'm going to shout out to our freelancers, our engagement freelancers. So we're going to go with Sam Langford, Global Science Show fame, Hannah Aobi, Sarah Cosgriff, awesome people. If you're doing anything vaguely creative, do go and find them out, pay them for their work. They're awesome. Jamie Gallagher for all your training and development needs. He's on the road pretty much constantly at this time of the year. Vari Stewart over in Germany, big fan of her work. Alina Loth, also over in Germany. Callum McAndrew, who's just recently moved to St Andrews Botanic, so anything botanical, go and have a chat with Callum. Oh, too many people to think. And I'm going to finish off. Oh, I'm trying to think who else. So many people. All the people at ScotPen. Yeah. Which, if you're in Scotland and in any way even vaguely associated with engagement, go and join ScotPen Facebook group. They're awesome. I think that's all I can think of. My brain's gone completely blank.
No, that's fine. I have,
but they're all definitely worth a follow, whichever social media platform you can find them on at this point.
Yes. Well, it just remains to say thank you so much, Kirsty, for coming along and having a chat with us today. It's been really interesting.
You're welcome. It's been a real laugh.
Thanks for listening to Research Adjacent. You can find show notes and other episodes at researchadjacent.com. I would absolutely love to hear what you think of the show, so please get in touch. You can drop us a message via researchadjacent.com or find us on social media at resadjacent. And if you've enjoyed the show, please think about sharing it, subscribing or leaving a review so that other people can find us too. Research Adjacent is presented and produced by Sarah McCluskey, and you, yes you, get a big gold star for listening right to the end. See you next time.